Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge is a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services with a primary marketing focus on the Port of Anchorage, providing their customers with quality-based service specifically tailored to their needs.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service. It's the 8th of January, and from me to you, a Happy New Year. I haven't seen you since. As always, we encourage you to visit our website at arh.noaa.gov to see the entire Alaska situation all at once. There's lots of links to all the different parts of our Weather Service operation in Alaska for you on the left side of that screen. You can always go to weather.gov as well. That'll lead you to the lower 48 information a little bit faster, and you can still click on Alaska to take it to your nearest Weather Service office that serves your community and village in Alaska. The weather info line is open at 800-472-0391. Find each Weather Service office on Twitter, on Facebook under U.S. National Weather Service Alaska, and on YouTube. Of course, you know by now you can get the daily weather briefings about mid to late afternoon, probably by 3:30 or 4 o'clock. Just a quick sneak peek of what's going on with the surface weather charts. And then after the show, of course, you'll be able to go to alaskapublic.org and see the entire broadcast on their YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube directly as well and just search for AKWX-TV or Alaska Weather TV for short. Here's a look at the weather situation across our state tonight. Wind chill advisories posted for the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. We're watching for wind chills that could drop down to about 50 to 55 below as we head into Thursday and into Friday there. And of course, at levels like that, it doesn't take a whole lot of time for skin to achieve frostbite or worse. So if you are going to be outside, again in the central eastern Beaufort Seacoast for any length of time tomorrow and Friday there with the wind, maybe only 10 to 15 miles per hour at all, with the cold coming in and the combination of the wind, it will feel like 50 to 55 below in some cases there. So use extreme caution if you're going to be out in that type of weather. Looking out to the west now in the Bering Sea, you can see the impact of that cold working its way off the continent, trying to work its way southward, of course, across the eastern parts of the Kamchatka Peninsula. What we're watching here in the longer term that will affect probably a great many more of us across the southwest, south central, and eventually southeastern Alaska is this developing surge of moisture here east of the Sea of Japan. Watch it once again. It's really not anything too impressive just yet, but it has the beginnings of something that could deepen into a much stronger storm here as we head toward the end of the week, probably approaching the western and central Aleutians. So we'll be watching for wind here to develop as we head toward the late week and into the weekend. We'll see where that tracks as it heads into the Gulf of Mexico. I'm sorry, Gulf of Alaska. I've been somewhere else. You'll notice the storm track across a large part of Alaska is really just on the southern part of this map. It's really riding south of the Aleutians and right here across the very southern edge of the Gulf of Alaska. This is taking a lot of the weather and, of course, keeping it away from south central. That being said, a weak area of low pressure has been working its way up across the Kenai Peninsula. This is really kind of working in tandem with another wave that's a little bit farther north and east, and we have colder air dropping southward. It's made its way across the Brooks Range and will likely stall out very close to the Alaska Range as we head into the next 24 hours. See if you can pick out that movement a little bit. You can see the colder air trying to work its way southward a little bit. But this wave right here is likely going to bring in several inches of snow to Anchorage through the evening and into the early morning hours tomorrow before winding down. As that's already worked its way over Kodiak, we expect many areas south and west of Anchorage to see a little bit of fog tonight. The snow should be quick to pass and gone by morning. In the meantime, another wave of low pressure here south and west of Klawock and Ketchikan is stirring up some more rain, mainly to the north and east. And once this next storm system develops out to the west again, we'll have to see what happens. But it looks like it does have the makings for another round of rain and snow, some of which could be heavy if we're parts of southeast. So a lot of things going on and taking shape. Not a whole lot going on exactly right at this moment that needs your direct attention as far as dangerous weather goes. The one exception is the developing wind and certainly the cold that's still pouring in across the north and eastern coast of the Arctic, which could lead to some dangerous wind chills as we head into tomorrow. So the weather map right now looks relatively garden variety, kind of okay. We've got a weak area of low pressure just to the north and east and central and southern parts of the Yukon. We've got a few scattered areas of light snow across the interior, some of those around Galena and the west coast around Tent City. It's been a little blustery out there across the western tip of the Seward Peninsula throughout today. Areas around St. Lawrence Island and the Seward Peninsula, we're seeing gusts around 40 to 50 miles per hour. Colder air is dropping south and west of the Aleutians now. That's down to 982 millibars. This whole area looks, kind of neat and clean on the weather map, but it seems to be pretty disorganized if you're watching it play out on the weather map itself. There's a stronger area of low pressure just off the map here. You can see it's trying to develop some rain across the leading edge of that. We've got another wave here in the south and western parts of southeast. And here's our weak little low that's working its way up the Kenai Peninsula. Again, perhaps bringing 1 to 3 inches of snow to parts of Anchorage and maybe some brief but gusty winds across the hillside. Probably nothing more than 25, 35 miles per hour tops. The frontal boundary sits across the Alaska Range as we head into tonight. That will keep some snow across the Mat-Su, the Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, all the way around the Horn into southeast. And we've got another weak wave just south of Yakutat there at 984 millibars. A little bit of a more organized storm well to the south that is working its way north and east, probably heading into southern parts of southeast as we head into tomorrow and the end of the week. Low pressure again kind of expansive in its organization there across the southern Bering Sea at 980 millibars. That will keep scattered rain and snow with very little accumulation, if any, around the Pribilofs and the central and western Aleutians. Better chance for snow showers around the Seward Peninsula, all the way down the YK coastline and into the northern parts of the Alaska Peninsula. Now, as far as the Arctic coast goes, most of what we're looking at is probably only flurries, but occasionally you might see a little more of a steady snow. Doesn't look like there's going to be much of a chance of accumulation. It's mostly a dry north wind coming in and high pressure is building in. That's pretty strong there across the Chukchi Sea. And as that moves that northerly wind in, the wind should pick up for the central and eastern coast, more of a north and westerly direction here. And again, that's going to drop those wind chills to 50, maybe 55 below. Here's that storm that's working its way up from the south. If you're watching from the Panhandle tonight, 982 millibars there. The winds are going to come up a little bit more tonight and tomorrow. Watch for a better chance of rain, especially in the southern half of southeast. The colder air across south central is starting to work its way in. Already, though, that wave of low pressure that could bring snow tonight is gone, absent from the map, and has been absorbed by the circulation there across the central and southern parts of the Yukon. Out to the west, not much has changed across the Bering. That's at 982 millibars. Still a pretty disorganized wave of low pressure, but now we can start to see the beginnings of that storm sneak in on the west side of the screen. 979 millibars. Here comes the next wave, and it's dropping to 966 millibars by Friday as the occlusion spreads into the northern and the central and southern parts of the Bering Sea. You can see that weak wave that was there has now been absorbed into the storm. We've got the triple point south of the Alaska Peninsula. Low pressure still hovering across the central and eastern Gulf down to 975 millibars as that pulls away from southeast. And once again, we've got a low there, mainly on the western side of Prince William Sound at 991 millibars, and another surge of colder air is working across the Arctic coast. So a lot of things are shaping up to kind of point us toward watching this storm here and seeing where that goes as we head into the weekend. And of course, southeast still looking at rainfall and scattering areas of snow across south central and southwestern Alaska. No big indication that any of those areas are going to see any sizable accumulations for Friday there. But it does look like there will be many opportunities for at least some light snowfall as we go toward the end of the week. Temperature-wise now, mid to upper 30s for southeast, 45 around Ketchikan. And as you head up toward Haines and Skagway and Juneau, temperatures there were in the mid to upper 30s. Yakutat was 35 around Prince William Sound, mid 30s there, upper 20s for the Susitna Valley, Mat-Su, the Anchorage area around Kenai, Homer. We saw temperatures spreading from about 10 degrees difference there from Kenai at 27 to about 36 around Homer and Seward. In Fairbanks, we're looking at temps in the single digits to about 10 in Fairbanks at the 4 o'clock hour, 12 in Eagle. Fort Yukon was 1 degree above zero, and once you got into the Brooks range, well, temperatures went sub-zero. Arctic Village was 18 below. The Arctic Coast 10 to as cold as 27 below around Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. Across the Chukchi Seacoast, most areas were a little bit closer to zero there, a little bit near Wainwright, about 11 below. In the Kotzebue Sound region, we saw temps at 1 below in Kivalina, 10 above. In Shishmaref, Nome was showing 24. St. Lawrence Island in the teens. In the lower and mid Yukon Valley, temps generally in the teens and 20s there. Looked like Galena was about 18 degrees, Tanana about 11. A little bit farther south and west toward Bethel, 33 degrees. Bristol Bay, mainly in the low to mid 30s there. In fact, most areas stayed above freezing for a large part of the day. 39 in Kodiak. The Pribilofs looking at temps above freezing as well as most of the chain in the mid to upper 30s. In fact, some cases a little bit closer to 40 degrees. Overnight low temperatures tonight, then back to the mid 30s for the Aleutians, south and west, teens and 20s. Nome closer to 17 degrees, 17 below those possible around Barrow. Teens to about 36 below there if you're in Fort Yukon to Arctic Village. For the central and eastern interior, anywhere from 0 to about 5 below, including Northway and Eagle. That's not a bad night for you at all. Teens and 20s for South Central, Kodiak 30, and temps generally above freezing into the low 40s, in fact, for southern parts of southeast. High temperatures tomorrow for the central and eastern interior, generally at or just below zero. North of the Yukon, you're looking at temps between 15 and 30 below. The Arctic coast, 10 to 25 below. The west coast, generally low to mid 20s. Nunivak Island, you're looking at about 30. Nome, expect a high of 20 tomorrow, 36 in Kodiak, upper 30s and lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. Southeast, upper 30s and lower 40s for you. South Central, mid 20s. Temperatures will be trending downward for the rest of the week. Flying weather now, you'll notice a wide swath of MVFR stretching all the way from the north and eastern Gulf Coast through the Alaska Range and out across the west coast and YK Delta and the central and eastern Aleutians. You'll notice a large swath of clearing, though, behind that wave of low pressure that's coming through tonight. So things should improve pretty dramatically heading through tomorrow. It might be pretty bright out there if we actually have some new snow, but again, the MVFR conditions are not expected in mass across most of South Central. Southeast, of course, you're still dealing with MVFR conditions there. Let's check on the passes as we go around the Horn in the north, Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass at VFR. Looking at the western parts of the Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, both MVFR. Rainy Pass and Windy Pass should also remain marginal throughout your Thursday. Isabel Pass and Mentasta Pass will likely remain marginal conditions through most of your Thursday. Tanita Pass should see some improvements toward VFR, and it looks like Portage Pass at this point is going to maintain VFR through most of the day. Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to see MVFR conditions there through your Thursday. With the cold air dropping in from the north, it's no surprise that the elevated freezing lines have pushed their way south and east. We can still pick up the ones at 2,000 and 4,000 feet, mainly across the eastern Gulf. The surface freezing line, though, hugging the Bristol Bay coastline. Icing potential, not a whole lot. There is opportunities mainly in the southern third of the state, below 5,000 feet across the YK Delta as well, below 2,000 feet if you're heading out of Northway or Eagle, and mainly below 7,000 feet, but above 2,000 feet for southern parts of southeast, all in association with that circulation south and west of Craig and Klawock. The jet stream showing that powerful northerly flow dropping in. We'll use that term that you've heard a lot lately, the polar vortex. It's something we're all familiar with. That's where our cold comes from. That northerly flow is dropping the colder air into the interior. So things will remain pretty dry across the interior in the coming days. The main storm track well south of Alaska, anywhere from 105 to 160 knots. And you can see that reflected and mirrored in the 9,000 foot streamlines with a west and southwesterly flow coming into the Gulf. That's going to keep the active weather here. But we do have some impulses sneaking their way into the Bering Sea. Winds are pretty light at this level for the interior. 5 to 10 knots or so generally from the north. At 3,000 feet, you can see the circulation here across South Central and into the western parts of Canada. More of a north and easterly flow just south of the Brooks Range. That picks up some speed, 30 to 45 knots there, so you might run into some chop at that level, and still holding onto our general westerly flow across the North Pacific and the Gulf of Alaska. Turbulence potential then along the frontal boundary, generally below 4,000 feet. Near the Alaska Range tomorrow, across the Aleutians, also below 4,000 feet, below 6,000 feet across southeast, and probably some residual lingering areas of turbulence up and down Cook Inlet. as the winds are shifting around behind that area of low pressure passing through tonight. Most of that looks to be light to isolated moderate, so it doesn't look like we should see any major turbulence problems around the state tomorrow. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back in just a few minutes with a look at the ice edge and, of course, your marine weather. Stay tuned.
Another area where the Federal Aviation Administration is using technology in advancing aviation safety is in the use of remote weather cameras as a tool to aid pilots in making safe flight decisions. Hello, I'm Sheila Balistreri.
So in '99, we really started what we currently call the Alaska Weather Camera Program. We say Alaska because it's the only place in the FAA that has this. One, it's available through the internet so that the pilots, their family, their friends, they can all take a look at what the weather's like before you go there. In addition, we have all of that available within all of our flight service stations so that each flight service station technician can call up and look at weather real time. And with that, provide a better briefing, whether it's pre-flight or in-flight for the pilots. By far the most popular thing we've ever done.
The weather camera system has been a good one. I'm sure you can tell from the, if you had access to the number of hits that they get that, on each site, that they're well used and they save a lot of gasoline, they save a lot of time for passengers out turning around in weather and coming back when a pilot can just look at the camera and make a decision based on that rather than going out and actually looking at the weather.
When we look at the cameras, and if it's a definite no-go situation, then we're not able, we don't send an airplane out to take a look at it and then have to just spend the gas and the time and energy to go out, take a look at it, and just turn around and come back.
By placing weather cameras throughout the state, we've certainly come a long way. Today, we have 55 cameras throughout the state, an investment of $7 million. 12 new sites are scheduled to be up and running by this October. This concept, I think, is stunning in its simplicity. The pilot goes online and can view 2 images for each location. The first shows what the site would look like in a perfectly clear day situation. The second shows current weather conditions. Pilots can now learn what the visibility is in the mountain pass they face and whether they want to fly through it before they take off. In many instances, they may decide not to fly, to hold on that flight for a while, depending upon what they see. And that's long before they set foot in the aircraft.
Alaska is a huge state, and the area covered so far by weather cams is comparatively small. In order for the project to be completed, 165 already identified sites need to be added. In what may be considered counterintuitive, many of these weather cameras are not placed at airports, but are positioned in or near mountain passes and other geographical areas, which are often used by pilots as navigational aids. Others are located at rural airports, where there are no weather observers or co-located with automated weather systems. Pilots report that the value in these weather cameras is the real-time information they receive about destination and route conditions. Flight service specialists also have access to the weather camera images and routinely brief pilots with the most up-to-date information before takeoff and during their flight.
We use the weather cams in 2 basic ways here at the flight service station. For self-briefing, to get ready to be able to brief the pilots, to look at the weather cam where we have an airport with a weather report. We can compare what we see on the screen with what the weather report says. Where we do not have weather reports available, then we can look at the camera and again get a picture of what the weather is like at those locations.
When I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is pull up the weather cameras to all the destinations in the southeast and check that against the actual reports at that station, and it gives you a lot better picture of what the weather's doing than what we used to enjoy with just the observation. And I'm sure all the pilots are doing the same thing. I know all of our pilots do. A well-placed camera looking in 3 different directions, there's nothing like that. Be able to see in real time what your weather actually looks like before you take off.
Cost benefit is quite a bit as far as saving us money. As we don't want a flight when we know that the weather's bad, when we can see it on the cameras that the weather is bad at our destination.
When the WeatherCam system was first proposed, there were some people who doubted its utility, and as they've come online, we've seen how the pilots really like to be able to see those pictures. They value it, and as they become available to us as briefers, we value it too.
I do thank you also for the cameras. I personally have used the cameras. I think that probably the one that's most used is the one over going through the pass into Lake Clark, and from time to time I get calls that it may not be functioning properly, which I'm pleased to say that Mr. Poe responds to very quickly.
During a recent independent study of Alaska pilots who have used the system, 68% reported making decisions to cancel or delay flights based on weather camera information. Pilots also reported that these decisions help them avoid additional fuel costs from flights that must be diverted or repeated due to bad weather. Now, these safety and economic advantages generated more than 2.3 million hits this past year on the FAA's Alaska WeatherCam website.
Time for a look at the Sea Ice Edge. You can always get this information from our Sea Ice program in Alaska by heading to weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php, and you can download the information if you would like to use it on your own mapping tools, perhaps Google Earth, which is what we're using here. Across the Bristol Bay coastline up through the Kuskokwim Bay and up toward Nunivak Island, you can see the ice edge is working its way southward. In view here, the Pribilofs and the continental shelf, so nowhere near that yet, and it is approaching St. Matthew Island. You can also see some of the ice working itself into Bristol Bay proper, and certainly the northern half of Cook Inlet there with at least some minimal ice concentration. So, as always, we'll continue to monitor this and pass on the information. If you have interests in that are affected by the sea ice edge, again, the website is highly recommended. You can also find the seasonal sea ice outlook to see perhaps when the Pribilofs might be getting closer and closer to that ice edge. Thursday's marine forecast now in southeast. Notice the onshore flow up and down the eastern Gulf Coast, anywhere from 20 to 25 knots, 10 to 15, maybe even 16-foot seas the farther south you go toward the Dixon entrance. And the inner channels, much stronger winds there south of Petersburg into Ketchikan and Metlakatla, southeasterly flow at 30 knots as that low pressure system's working northward. That could bring seas up to 9 feet there. They'll drop to about 5 feet as you head into Friday. Southeasterly flow around Stevens Passage, 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. A southwesterly flow a little bit closer to the Lynn Canal with a 5-foot sea. And we're still holding on to that onshore flow from Yakutat all the way down to the Dixon entrance between 20 and about 30 knots. Seas closer to 15, maybe even 17 feet. Around South Central, remembering we still have a decent amount of ice there across the northern parts of the Cook Inlet. In ice-free waters, we'll say that's about 2-foot seas there with a variable flow around 10 knots. Otherwise, a west and southwesterly flow coming across Kodiak Island and through the Barren Islands and into Kamishak Bay. A westerly flow east of Seward and Resurrection Bay as well, around 20 knots. And inside Prince William Sound, winds should be rather light and variable. They become northeasterly, though, as we head into Friday with a 15-knot wind. We'll maintain the westerly flow coming across the northern Gulf Coast, though, 20 to 25 knots all the way down the Kenai Peninsula. Light winds up and down the Cook Inlet there. In fact, maybe even variable west of the Barren Islands at 10 knots with a 3-foot sea. Westerlies coming across Shelikof Strait with a 4-foot sea on Friday. Across the Alaska Peninsula, a west and southwesterly flow there, 25 knots mainly north of Cold Bay with a 9-foot sea. Westerlies on the Pacific side with 25 knots, 12-foot seas are expected there on Thursday. More of a south and westerly shift taking over on Friday. Southerlies inside Bristol Bay with a 5-foot sea, 25 knots though coming into Castle Cape, and the western side of Kodiak Island with a 9-foot sea expected to wrap up the week. Across the Aleutians now, a general west and southwesterly flow coming in. 35 knots there north of Adak, Atka, north of Nikolsky. That drops off a little bit to 30 knots. A southwesterly flow on the Pacific side, 25 to 35 knots there, with seas running around 13 to 18 feet, especially south of Adak and Atka. Now for the central Aleutians on Friday, not a whole lot of a change. More of a south and westerly flow continues there for the Pacific side. And you'll notice more of a southerly flow from Nikolsky out toward Unalaska, but notice the shift taking place here. That's that encroachment of that low pressure wave coming in from the North Pacific there. And remember, that's one we're watching to see how that develops heading into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Across the west coast, we've got ice now around St. Lawrence Island and into a large part of the St. Matthew Island waters there for that zone. Variable flow north of Nunivak Island. South of that, we've got seas at 3 feet with a southerly flow and southwesterlies coming across the Pribilofs with a 7-foot sea. That picks up a little bit more as we head into Friday with a 20-knot wind. North or southeasterlies coming into the south side of Nunivak Island at 20 knots, and northeasterlies coming out of the Bering Strait and off the continent between 20 and 30 knots over the ice edge. Across the northern parts of Alaska, you'll notice that wind coming in generally from the north. That is some cold stuff. 10 to 15 knots into Barrow, Prudhoe Bay, and Dead Horse. A northwesterly flow coming into Kaktovik, and stronger winds running down the northwestern coast, 20 to 35 knots. Notice the winds picking up here Thursday into Friday. A westerly flow at 20 to 30 knots. Again, that wind chill advisory is very important to mind. Wind chill values could drop 50 to 55 below there for the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast again. So watch those temperatures and certainly watch the wind chill, and don't go out if you don't have to. Recapping what's going on tonight, generally garden variety weather. We've got some snow moving through the south central areas tonight, rain and snow for parts of southeast, and a disorganized system across the Bering Sea, scattering rain and snow showers there. As we head into Thursday, colder air is dropping southward, stronger winds picking up across the Arctic coast. Snow will pass through quickly across south central and reorganize across southern parts of southeast, continuing with an opportunity for light and scattered snow across south central and southwestern Alaska Friday. A new storm strengthens in the west, and storm moves a little bit further away from the southeast coast. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.